Hello and welcome to the Not Quite Otaku Anime Podcast, Episode 4. I'm one of your hosts, Joe,
And I'm Brandon.
and today we'll be doing another episode of Does It Hold Up? And I am excited about this one. Brandon, you want to tell everyone what we're talking about?
So we watched Blue Gender, which is an anime initially released in 1999, follows the story of a young man who had a uncurable illness, so he was frozen and awoken some 20-ish years in the future. I think he was awoken in 2031.
Yeah, 2031, yeah.
Yeah, to a world that is now overrun by giant bug monsters.
Called The Blue.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're so excited, why don't you take us off?
Oh, okay. Ooh. Well, I'm just excited to talk about this because I just got a lot of thoughts about it. But yeah. So I mean, just to give a little backstory. So yeah, Blue Gender. It's an anime series, 26 episodes. It's of note that there is a movie called Blue Gender: The Warrior. That came out later. That came out in 2002 in Japan and 2004 in the U.S. So the release date for the original one was 99 to 2000 in Japan, and then 2003 in the U.S. And Blue Gender: The Warrior is sort of like, it's like a compilation with some new scenes and new editing and a different ending and all that stuff. So we didn't watch it. At least you didn't watch it, right?
No. I
Okay,
decided
yeah,
not to watch it. Figure stick with the original series and not to get anything confused with what happens in the movie, because I have heard it is a little different.
Yeah, I started to, and I was like, nah, I can't remember anything to begin with. I don't want to try to start confusing myself. So we didn't watch it, but that's just something of note. So yeah, Blue Gender, it's a 26 episode series. I wrote down, I just had a note, which I just loved this description of it. I called it a giant bug mech love story with some horror? ? So I feel like that's, I don't know, what do you think about that description of it?
So I think that's kind of fair. I will say I think that this show is primarily a romance. I think the A plot throughout the whole story is a love story between Yuji, the young man who was awakened to this new world, and Marlene, who is your stereotypical super soldier. You know, and they're often juxtaposed against each other, where Yuji is constantly run by his emotions, and Marlene is her actions are purely dictated by duty, at least in the beginning.
Yeah, she's the cold, stoic one, but Yuji slowly
and so I think
her heart.
This is a romance that is set in a post-apocalyptic world with giant robots, and it's kind of a mess at times because of that.
I mean, we will. We can get into that, but no, that's actually, you point that out though. It is. I'd agree with you that the A plot line through it is the one constant throughout the show, because it goes everywhere. And we will again talk more about that, but the one constant and the one thing you can probably hold on to throughout it is the love story between Marlene and Yuji, and how or just their relationship in general. I mean, but
it
eventually
maybe
develops
not even
more and more.
Explicitly love story, but their relationship and how they interact with each other, and particularly how Yuji changes Marlene, which is again another thing that I think the show kind of tricks you on. I think Marlene is also the most important character. I think Marlene's the main character of the story, but a lot of it is told through Yuji's eyes.
Yeah, well, and I'd say it actually really is. There's a shift in the show. I think it's about halfway through, maybe a little bit later.
Yeah.
But it is very much about Marlene more so, and she really becomes the focus. So it is almost like a two-part thing you get, but they're always complementing each other. So it's never like one person just falls off completely.
Yeah.
So man, I don't even know where to begin with this. So I'm super excited to talk. Well, sorry, I'm a little over the place, but there's just so much to talk about. But the one thing I just want to talk about, so I just want to give a brief history of the show for us, because I think it is kind of interesting that we are going back to look at it, because I'll quickly give mine, and then I think yours is maybe a little similar, but I just want to hear your thoughts.
Okay.
But Blue Gender aired on Adult Swim, so that was my first exposure to it, and I remember as I was watching it, I remembered a couple things distinctly. Episode 5 apparently I thought was the first episode. Nope, it wasn't. But there were scenes from that I was like, that's the one thing I remember. I remember the ending. Literally the ending credits and the song, and I remember Yuji screaming a lot, and that was about it. And I was always fascinated by the show because it was one of those things, and I don't know if other people have this experience where you see a part of it, of a show, especially when you were younger, and you're like, what is this? Like, this is so interesting and weird and cool. And like, it's like these giant insects and it's crazy and violent, whatever. And so I was just always curious, like, what it was. So then recently, against your recommendation, I purchased it, and because I said I want to watch it, and then we were starting the podcast, and I was like, we should watch this. But well, I don't know, what's your experience and thoughts with it?
Yeah, so it was the same. I initially found this show on Adult Swim. It was probably in the mid 2000s, probably around 2004 2005 range, and I had never, with much of the anime I watched back then, especially TV anime, I was never able to consistently, like, every week get the next episode, so I never really watched shows start to finish. So I'd maybe seen half of Blue Gender in chunks here and there. And eventually I did actually buy the box set. And this was, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, you got the beefy box set.
Yeah,
I got the nice sleek
back when
anime
there were
classics.
3 episodes per disc. That was the era of anime boxes that I bought. Back when they used to, sell you a disc for $20 with 3 episodes on it.
Like, yeah, I'm glad those days are over.
Yeah.
For the most part, except for Aniplex.
So I watched it. And that was, like I said, the last time I watched this show was probably 15 years ago. And I didn't remember liking it that much. I remember watching it and wanting to see it, but that's mostly what I remembered of the show. Basically, the first half was much more in my memory now than the second half was, because there is a big change there. And I just remember being disappointed of purchasing it. But that's about it.
It's just you remembered the feeling of buyer's remorse that
yeah.
sets in
Definitely
every time you
felt
stare
like I
at your
had
box
buyer's
set.
remorse on that one. It probably was largely because this was one of the first anime shows I purchased. Like, it was probably around the time, like, I had Cowboy Bebop, Witch Hunter Robin, and this, I think. Yeah.
What a collection.
Right?
Okay. Yeah, no, I remember those days where it's like, this is the first anime on DVD I bought, and then, like, now it's too many of them to count. So where do you want to start with this? Should we start with...
Well, let's just first talk about some of the problems overall I think the show had.
Oh, boy.
Not going into necessarily plot, but more from a technical issues.
Sure.
So, like,
I've got lots of thoughts on that.
Yeah, because there was one thing that bugged me throughout the entire show. It seemed like once or twice per episode, I'd have to rewind and put on subtitles because the audio volume, people would just be talking in unhearable whispers.
Oh, I never had to go that far, but the audio sucks at points.
Yeah, and
like,
I would have just watched the entire series through with subtitles, and I don't know if you ever turned the subtitles on your version and if it's better, but the subtitles were absolutely awful and almost unreadable on these discs.
Oh, really?
And, yeah. They were like often white text, but the backgrounds would be white a lot of the time.
Yeah, because there's
so
like a ton of sand in parts of that, like where they're literally in a desert, so white on tan is not good.
And a lot of sky shots where it'd just be white on white, and I'm just like, I can't. And it was in. I think they tried to make it look like a kind of alien font. It just looked bad. It was.
Well, that's even worse. Like, yeah. I mean, so one of the biggest complaints, like, if we're talking audio, I mean, just the audio and voice acting, it goes from like a range of good. I mean, like, Marlene's voiced in English by Laura Bailey, who's like a pretty well-known voice actress and like has been doing this forever, and she's like good, and obviously, like, and there's people like, but man, so it's like you get these like main characters who are like great to passable, somewhere in that range, and then you just get these minor characters. You're like, where did they pull this person from? Like, did they literally just grab a dude off the street, throw him in a booth, and just say like, here, just read these couple lines real quick, like go.
Yeah, your core cast is a bunch of generally very accomplished voice actors who do a good job. You have Eric Vale in there, who does he's Shigaraki in My Hero, Sanji in One Piece, along with a bunch of other stuff, and he voices Yuji. Like you said, Laura Bailey, and she's a Lust from Fullmetal Alchemist.
Yeah,
is what I recognized her from, but also just highly credited. The guy who voices adult Goku is Rick's voice actor.
Okay, but sorry about that, but Rick was horrible.
Oh, but Rick was horrible. But it's just like you had
so I don't know what happened there, because I'm like,
and I think Tony,
phoning that one in.
Yeah, Tony and Miyagi's voice actors were both also very accomplished people.
Yeah,
But
Jerry Jules, one of my, I love him.
yeah,
He does
Jerry
Barry the
Jules,
Chopper.
right.
He's in Fruits Basket. He's in like every.
He's Victor.
He's the
in,
bunny in Shin Chan that gets
yeah,
beat up.
Victor and Yuri on Ice.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
no, I'm
so
like
you
always
have like
excited
this
when he's-
core group of pretty good, accomplished people that do a decent job, and like you said, every side character does seem like they just pulled them off the street. It was like, can you read some lines for us?
And it's like also like too, I don't think the writing is very good. So whether it was the initial Japanese was bad, the translation was bad, I don't know. But like, and again, this is, you're talking early 2000s, so localization and stuff like that probably wasn't as where it is today. I think it's gotten better over the years, but like even still, there was one point we want to talk about voices. I'm just looking to see her name because I want to make sure I get it. Elena. There was a scene. Yeah, there was a scene with Elena, and I just was like, I'm just like, get her a new microphone. What is happening? It was literally like she was like, it just was muffled on the, and I'm like, what is she saying? I couldn't make out any of the audio, the dialogue, and then suddenly in the middle of the episode, it just fixes itself.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so like, how did no one catch that?
And that happened. There was just several instances of that exact thing happening, but that was the first time I really noticed it, where I was like, oh this is terrible.
God, it was awful. Like, it was, I mean, and, I'm a pretty forgiving person, but that, like, jumped out at me. I was just like, what is happening? Like, what were they? And then just, like, oh, man. And, God, there's so many. So, yeah, we talk about minor characters, and this goes to a problem I have with the show in general, is there are so many characters. So many characters all the time. New plot, new thing, I mean, you're like 17 episodes in, and you're just introduced to like 7 new characters, and it's like, figure it out. And I'm just like, anyway.
Yeah, so, but if you watch it from the perspective that none of them matter, that Yuji and Marlene are the only ones that actually matter, it's easy to just ignore them.
Yeah, that's true. And because none of them, most of them are not that interesting. I liked, I think it's Dice, right? He's the one older guy. They're on the way to Baikonur, which is a base that they're trying to reach to try to get back to. Big important thing is they're trying to reach. So there is a satellite called Second Earth.
Let's hold up. If we're gonna go into talking plot, let's just kind of go from the start.
Okay. All right. First, let's finish the voices, and then we'll start going to plot. So yeah. So there's a character, Dice. I liked him. He's cool. But yeah, man, like Alicia's a character that comes in later, and there's a part I put in here as my notes, just everybody die. If anyone's interested, just watch that scene. I'm not going to try to recreate it here, but it's just one of those things where, it takes you out of it for a second. I mean, like I said, Rick, who is this kind of, chauvinistic kind of character guy, he's just like,
he's just the man's man. He
he's the, hey ladies, I'm gonna like slap you on the butt and make me a sandwich or something. Like, it just was like, okay. So it was just tons of not only terrible, just kind of cliches of like, hey, like, but it was also just really poorly voiced. And then when I saw that it was Sean Schemmel who does the voice of Goku, I was like, what was he doing? I don't know. But so yeah, so I will say, when you have the moments of Yuji, Marlene, it's good, it's fine, it's, but there's just like, I agree, the audio is just all over the place with this show.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to? Go ahead.
That was my biggest problem from a production standpoint. Like, it seems like that is just inexcusable. Like you said, like, just get a new microphone, just record another take. Have someone actually mix these voices so they're all the same volume when they're all supposed to be whispering to each other. It's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, did you ever get the feeling when you were watching this that this was like the B team project, or like maybe even the C team project, where it was just kind of like, hey guys, like, we got this show from Japan. It's kind of weird. Just like, do the best you can with it, and we're just gonna pump it out real quick. Like, it just felt like.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, it just felt like almost as if like the attention to detail and the care was just not there in a way that isn't even the excusable late 90s anime thing. It was just like, because it just felt.
Yeah, when something is consistently bad of the same poor quality, you can just kind of understand that, like, oh, that's just what that is. But this ranges from like bad to good to acceptable throughout of the production quality on it, I think. And that it's just so inconsistent. It seems really off-putting. It's very noticeable, I guess, is what it makes it.
Oh yeah, it pops out at you in moments, and you're just like, whoa, okay. Yeah. So I think we can both agree the voice acting audio is a mixed bag, for sure. Um, so then I guess let's get into the plot a little bit then, just to give a little more context behind it. So we were talking about Earth has been taken over by this alien-ish, well, not alien, but like insect creature.
Yeah, think
called
like
the Blue.
Starship Troopers, for point of reference. If you're
like
giant bugs.
Like stuff you'd see in like the Jurassic period, like when everything was all the gigantic like, dragonflies that were, 10 feet wide or something like that kind of stuff. So, so they've taken over the planet as a dominant species, and they put people into these little green balls, and then they just like eat them, and they kind of store them basically, and then they have these giant nests that they've built, so they've taken over cities and everything else. So humanity mostly had the people who could fled to a satellite called Second Earth. And there were people who had this illness like Yuji, and fill in anything if I'm missing anything, but like Yuji, who had this illness, but it was actually a genetic mutation, which is also related to the Blue. But they were put into these chambers to fall to sleep for years to be taken back. So then Marlene's mission is to bring back the sleepers safely. He's one of the ones he wakes up. So now her goal is to get him to Second Earth.
Yeah, so that's
the first half of it.
That is basically the first half of the show, where Marlene is a part of a Second Earth military unit that is sent back to Earth to recover these sleepers. They're all in cryogenic stasis, and they generally take them back still in their stasis chambers. In the beginning of the first episode, you see Yuji wakes up. I imagine because of a chamber malfunction of some sort.
There's also the Blue attacks them as they're wheeling him out, and so then he gets saved by Marlene, and that's how he gets wrapped up in her groups, and then eventually he starts off as a total doof, and just like there's a part that he pees himself because he's so scared, which is just great. Like I was like, that's the ultimate. Like it reminded me of Otacon in Metal Gear Solid when he like pees himself. I don't remember
and that's really what the first like 5 episodes are, is to introduce you to this new world through the eyes of Yuji, who is also just experiencing this new post-apocalyptic world. And it's just a lot of Yuji screaming, and Yuji being scared, and Yuji being angry, and close-ups on his face. And they just really hammer it down, like everyone's gonna die because this world sucks. You see that? See that other character you like? They're dead now. So is this one. So is this other one.
Hey, that person we just introduced to you 3 seconds ago? They're dead. They're dead now. Like,
yeah.
No, this show is like if there was like an award for just the close-up scared face with the like trembling eye look thing, that is like the go-to for this show, where everyone, when they're just terrified, it's the mouth agape, eyes wide, like, and then the little twitchy thing.
Yeah, and maybe like a very slow pan, and it'll hold that shot for like 15 seconds of just like, see this person's face? They're scared still.
Or you get the jump cuts. This show, I've never seen so many jump cuts in my life. It looks like, this is a weird reference, but if anyone watches wrestling, like how WWE now, they'll do, when someone's getting hit in the ring, to make it look more actiony, they'll like cut the punches, and it's like that, and it's just like boom, 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 and it's like then you end up not knowing what the heck's happening, and you can't see anything. It's like that, where it would be like just face, blue, face, blue, face, blue, face, blue, face, blue, face, and it would be a million of them.
Yeah.
To the point where you might have a seizure watching it, and it's just, I was like, why? Why are you doing this?
Yeah, so that like, I don't think there's much to be said about that first section of the show. There's the super awkward. The only thing that stood out to me is the humming scene. So when there's this character, Joey is humming a song, and apparently Yuji recognizes it, and that's his connection to this new world now, that like, oh, they still have music, except Yuji like, it's like, oh no, you hummed that wrong. This is how it really goes. And it sounds like he does the exact same thing back to him.
It totally does. And it's super weird, and it's just the two of them, and it's quiet, and it's just like, and it's I knew what they were doing, where they're like, oh, look at this like touching connection. It'd be like, oh, someone who grew up in the 70s, and they hear like a young kid singing Zeppelin, and they're like, oh, let me hum Stairway to Heaven with you too, young kid.
Yeah.
But then like correcting them, and then like kind of doing it the same, and then it's just like, it was like, I know what you're trying to do, but I don't know if it's working.
Yeah, I don't think it executed well at all.
Yeah, and then, Spoiler: Joey dies. Big thing in this show is everyone other than the main characters die. I feel like pretty much.
Well,
I
and
think yeah.
I think that becomes kind of relevant. So when you go in, like I said, first major part of the story is just everyone dying, bad things happening, making the audience and Yuji realize just how bad Earth is now.
Yeah, this
And
world
then
sucks.
It leaves you in a place where it's just Yuji and Marlene, and they're on foot walking through the mountains. And this is where you get your first, like, Marlene might have some humanity in her moment, which is kind of the overarching theme of the show is Yuji's relentless emotion cutting through Marlene's outer shell and making her realize what feelings are, because it's really like she was trained not to have any feelings at all. And it's very clear, like, she doesn't know what love is. She doesn't know what, like, actually caring about another person is.
That really totally not awkward feeling up scene that they have where her and Joey and Yuji sees it and he's like, what's going on? You guys are together. And she's like, it's just a thing.
It's they use the people of Second Earth use sex as a relief and as a release. Which it has nothing to do with a connection, and it's very utilitarian. There is no caring within it. It's just this is a thing that helps us like level
because
out.
Life sucks and we can at least feel good for a little bit. But that's like I think goes to, so touching on, like, we talked about that song and then that moment, it kind of goes to a thing where this show, like, I totally get what it's trying to do, but it fails pretty much every time at it. So like I was like, yeah, that makes sense. If you are in a situation where life is grim, awful, and there's not a lot of people around, and you just, people would naturally be like, yeah, fool around, no strings attached kind of thing. Like, that's a normal, I think, natural human thing that happens in situations like that. But it's the execution of it is just because the animation is just not good. And then just the setups are not good. It's just these things come out of nowhere. It's like, it's never, you can never see where it's leading. I mean, they're just, oh man, like, I guess I'll go into this part of one of my complaints with the show. It's just like any attempt at sexual, like, content is awkward, weird, uncomfortable. I mean, there's a part where I think it's Sue, because it's Sue and she has a sister and they're twins, and I didn't realize that until way into it. I was like, oh. But there's this part where she's on the computer and then the other woman comes in and she's like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, hiding whatever thing she was doing that she shouldn't have been. And then they just start making out in the computer. And I'm just like, where did this come from? There's no setup. There's no context. It's just constant things like that. Or like literally it looks like Rick is trying to date Marlene at one point. And I'm just like, what is happening? And it's just like...
So I actually don't like... I think within the world they set up, I do think those things make sense. Like, they show scenes of... And even just, like, it starts with the first one you were talking about, where Marlene and Joey, in the first couple episodes, you've seen them having a casual encounter. But, like, the people on Second Earth just openly in public places are... Like, it's just a thing that happens... in their society. Like, it's incredibly casual, incredibly normal. There is no emotional element to it at all. There's also no shame in it. It's like there's no prudency. So
yes, I agree with that, but then the thing is the execution of it just is so bad. Is that there's a scene later on where Alicia is taking Yuji and you think that it's, it kind of leads you to believe that, oh, she's trying to get him so that they can have sex or whatever, and they lead to this place where all these people, it's just like an orgy. It's just like this kind of like inside the bowels of the space station kind of thing where all these people are on these like catwalks and they're just, you see these poorly animated bodies entangled together. And it reminded me of like something like Devilman Crybaby in terms of where, and I know you didn't really like that show, but where that show is very graphic, explicit, sexual stuff happening. I mean, more so than this. But the thing about that is, and it's not always animated in a way. I mean, the art style is different, but it actually kind of looked almost similar in some ways, I think. But the thing is that show sets up a world better than this, where it's like, yeah, you might just see a giant orgy at a party, and it doesn't feel just like it's sprung out of nowhere. Like, even though, yes, Blue Gender does establish this idea that people will, potentially have casual relationships and whatnot, it's never done. There's no build up to it, so it's just like dropped into, it's just dropped into a scene of two people randomly making out or like feeling each other up, and you're just like, one of the things I thought about is this show to me feels like a 15-year-old boy watched Evangelion and wanted to make an anime, and it was blue gender. Like that's, because it's got so many things that it's not developed in a, if that makes sense.
And I think that is a big problem with the organization of the show overall. So we were talking before, the show is basically split into two major parts. You have the escape from Earth.
You could even say three, maybe. There's like this weird little middle, and then it kind of goes to the end, but yeah.
Yeah, but there's the escape from Earth, and then there's the, drama on the space station. And then attempted reclaiming of Earth.
Yeah.
But even then, like, it is pretty consistent throughout the first part where they're just trying to escape from Earth. I think there's a pretty decent through line throughout. I have to
say that was my favorite part of the show, is the first part.
And it really goes off the rails once they get to Second Earth, which I think happens in like episode 12.
Something like, it's about midway through. Maybe it's a little bit later, but yeah, it is. Yeah, I think I agree. Because so all these complaints I have, the one thing I will have to say, the entire time I watched it, I also wasn't mad.
Yeah.
Like I kind of was just like, I was with it. So I don't really, it's a weird feeling that like I watched this show and there's so many bad things about it, and there's so many just ups and downs of the plot, and I was still just, but I'm like, I'm with you. I'm still going to follow you to the end. It never reached a point where I wanted to be done. So I don't know. That's just a weird thing I noticed about when I watched the show.
So I feel pretty much the same way, that I was invested throughout watching it. And I think, again, it just comes down to Marlene particularly, I thought was an interesting and well-written character. And throughout the mess of the whole show, like I was invested in that character, even more so than Yuji, who at times is insufferable.
Yeah, there's moments like in the beginning where he's just this total doofus, and then later on in the show where his genetic similarities to the blue they're enhanced basically, and they're creating him into this killing.
Yeah, let's go into that a little bit, because I think there's an important moment. So, like I said, the first half of the show is escape from Earth, Marlene basically transporting Yuji back to Second Earth. And there's a moment at the end of that where Marlene's ready to sacrifice herself to let everyone else escape. And Yuji comes up with a plan and stops her. And it's like this come to Jesus moment where she finally gets it. She's like, oh, like, I care about this person. It's not like duty isn't the only important thing. Other people are important, and I care about Yuji. And so then they go back to the space station, and it's largely, the story focuses on Marlene now, and even like the perspective changes, for where the first half of the show you were viewing the show from Yuji's eyes, and now it's much more often you're viewing from Marlene's eyes. Yeah,
because when they get back to the Second Earth, they take Yuji away. They're like, thanks, mission accomplished, see ya. And she's like, well, wait, when am I gonna get to see him? And then everyone in this high council that they have is like, you messed up, man, everyone's dead. Like,
and
and she's like, you don't even know what we went through to do this, to get there. And that him and I worked together as this team, and they're like, sorry, man, like
your orders, you didn't follow orders. You weren't supposed to wake him up. You're not supposed to do this. And
Joey didn't come back. Like, there's there's a lot of
so they were forced separation, and then there's some stuff happens. They end up working together on a team, but now that Marlene has squared her feelings, we still got another half a show to watch, so we can't just have them both understand their feelings for each other. So now this is, again, another thing that was kind of dropped out of left field, is like, oh, now Yuji is like completely obsessed with being a strong warrior, and he even has evil voice now, like the voice acting change. It's like,
it reminded me of like Batman and Bruce Wayne kind of thing, like Christian Bale, where no, my God, it's so funny, because that was one of the things that stood out to me too. I was like, when did this happen? Like, he just all of a sudden, so Tony, I think, who we mentioned earlier, is another one of, so there's a few of these sleepers who are awakened, and then now they're going to be, because of their abilities, because they have this genetic defect, I guess you could call it.
Mutation or whatever.
Yeah, mutation. That's the word.
Yeah.
That's similar to the blue. So that gives them. The scientists have figured out a way to enhance their powers with that and everything with the mobile suits they have, and
yeah.
And so, Tony's like the ace pilot guy. He's really good, and Yuji notices him from the beginning, and then there's Alicia, who I mentioned earlier, who's a young girl, which also, never mind, I'll get into that later. But so Yuji's all of a sudden just out of nowhere. It's just I remember the scene. Just all of a sudden, he's just screaming about Tony or whatever, and he's I gotta be better than him. I gotta do this, and then there was no context as to why he was freaking out until I think maybe 2 episodes later. They're like, yeah, the blue makes you really aggressive, and it was like, oh, okay, like
it's like, oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, it just felt like roid rage out of nowhere, and I was just like, so again, there's so many things just dropped on you with no context.
Yeah, and the voice change was the thing that killed me the most, because it's almost as if like we have to make it clear, because we haven't really described it in plot, that Yuji is unhinged, so let's just make him sound crazy now.
Yeah, just have him be real gravelly, grunty, and yelling it, and so then so the roles flip, where then Yuji is this heartless, obsessed monster where he just wants to kill the blue and humans be damned. There's a point where there's kids and he doesn't care. He's got to kill the blue. I got to be better than Tony. And he's freaking out. And Marlene's the one trying to get him to be reasonable. And
they've role reversed. And Marlene is now the one that has positive human emotion and is looking out for another way of doing things. And Yuji is the one that, no, I have to fight. Fighting the blue is all that matters.
Yeah. And so what happens, I guess we'll kind of wrap up the plot so we can get more into the details again. But so basically then there's a coup on board with the scientists and the High Council. There's a little conflict. One guy takes over. So there's that. And Marlene joins up with the scientists. And I mean, there's so many characters and plots. I'm not even going to get into like names and things like that, because it is just all over the place.
Yeah, so we'll just throw out Second Earth is traditionally Second Earth is run by a military council, and the military controls everything with an iron fist. There is a scientist, Seno Miyagi. Yeah. Miyagi is a scientist who has been researching the blue from the start, working with the High Council. He recognizes that what the High Council is dangerous, that these sleepers are dangerous, and they need to stop aiding them in growing their power, because it would end up backfiring on humanity. So he stages a coup with Marlene's help to displace the High Council and take over Second Earth.
Yes, and so there's that conflict, and then Marlene like talks the sense into him. Yuji kind of snaps out of his blue-induced roid rage. They realize that Tony is now trying to basically be the messiah for Earth, because he is siding with the blue, essentially, because they share this genetic DNA, and he gets Alicia to help him.
Which is another thing that just comes out of, like, Alicia gets brainwashed, I guess, but they don't put any context
suddenly
into that. Like,
yeah, you really don't. I felt like you really don't see it in anything. Yeah. So then, there's just he then eventually they had gone down on a mission to Earth. He brings the blue up from Earth into the Second Earth, so into the space station, which wreaks havoc. Eventually, they save the day. They kill Tony, and then eventually they go back down to Earth. They jump like a few months. I think it's like 3 months later.
Like
so then, like
3 months later.
Yeah, because so Tony dies. All the High Council people have either been turned into green goo balls or are killed or arrested and things like that. You get a really interesting sex scene with Marlene and Yuji, which then explains later on what happens. But a few months later, you find they go down into this. They're like, hey, all the blue are just suddenly going to this part in South America, just like in the jungle, which is weird because they're always in the cities. They go find this big nest. There's this giant thing in the bottom of this pit. Marlene and Yuji are left there by themselves. Yuji's like, I got to do this alone. He goes, they fight a giant blue. Yeah. And then there's this weird...
Because there has to be one more fight, I guess. That also just felt like... all the blue are gone and the blue are disappearing, but all of a sudden there's this super blue waiting to guard the last place they need to be. It's like
so they finally defeat that, and then he finds this like weird liquid thing that's solid though, so he can kind of go into this goop and he, I don't know, sees the universe or something, and you find out that, and he tells Marlene like, hey, you gotta, I'll come back, and don't worry about me. So she leaves and meets up with the rest of the people, and then they come back. You find out she was pregnant, or they talk about it in the cave.
In the cave.
She reveals it. That's right. And so that's and then eventually they get back. Miyagi gets killed by the soldiers, because what ends up happening is they all realize that like, this sucks, because he wants them to just live in this world of, we're going to just try to survive on this space station. It's the only hope. And everyone realizes that sucks, being on a space station.
Yeah,
forever.
and there was also one line in there
supplies.
that indicated that they were basically just waiting to die within the next like year.
Yeah.
Like one of the high council people before he's killed says something along the lines of like, see how you last with only a couple months of supplies up here.
Yeah, so it's like they're gonna eventually have to go to Earth to get stuff anyway, or whatever. So basically, that's kind of how it ends. And then you get like they kind of do this like montage with the Japanese version of the opening song, which was fun.
Yeah, I did enjoy that.
I like that too. I also I just want to say I really liked the opening and ending music.
Oh,
I was totally into it the whole time.
I think I should have mentioned that at the start, maybe, that like the opening and endings were solid. Some of the best of any show I've seen. I think I usually skip opening sequences after the first time. Same with ending ones, but I watch these almost every time for each episode.
Yeah, I'm surprised you liked it, because I was gonna say I don't think you were really as into like anime openings and endings as I am, where
I'm usually
will actively listen to them. I was like totally into it. I was like, all right, cool. So I was always pumped every time an episode started. So that's a good thing, because honestly, that does make a difference for getting into a show.
Yeah.
So that kind of is the gist of the show, without giving too much away. But as you could probably hear from this description from us, one of the big issues is there are a million different threads in this show plots. I think what you said, Brandon, is a good point. If you just look at it and follow it as a Marlene and Yuji story, makes it a lot easier to follow, because one thing I did try to do was care about these characters in the beginning, and like we said, everybody dies and people die in graphic ways. And so that's one thing about this show, is it does not shy away from violence. One part in particular is the Blue attack them on this like an airport kind of thing almost, because they're about to take off. They're trying to take off to Second Earth. It's like one of the first things.
So it's like their military base, basically.
Yeah, and there's this part where they disrupt the car, and the one woman's head just like smacks the window, and you see like it looks like a tomato splattered on it.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, these guys are not messing around. And the Blue, they mess people up. So it's but it to me felt like if this show was either, if you took all these subplots away and really focused on just the Yuji Marlene story, and maybe trying to reclaim Earth from the Blue, and got all this political mumbo jumbo out of the way, I think it'd be good. Or if you wanted to expand the show, then you could allow room for things to actually develop and give context to them, and I think it would have been more successful. So this needed to either be like 2 seasons, basically, like double it up, or trim the fat and just make it about defeating the Blue.
I'm kind of curious. I tried to look into it and I couldn't find anything. But so this is an original anime. This isn't based off of another IP or another piece of media.
It's like not based on a manga.
No.
I believe so.
It is. So I was going to say, I'm curious if they initially wrote it to be longer, if they had like 2 seasons planned or something, and wanted to spread all this out, but for ratings reasons or something like that, had budget, they had to shove it down into a single season. Because I agree completely that the reason all of these other things happening that aren't like around Marlene and Yuji's story don't work is because they're not given nearly enough time to be developed, to settle, to really be understood. They're all just happening, and you're expected to just kind of go with it. But
I'm glad to know that it wasn't just I'm an idiot when I was watching it, because there are moments sometimes where I know that there are sometimes obvious things that I miss in shows, and I was just like watching it, I'm like, man, I hope I'm not stupid. And then so it's good to hear you say like that, the same things.
Yeah, it leaves a whole bunch of stuff happens off screen, and you're just expected to just deal with it, which is
Yeah.
fine if you handle it well, but when it's mostly dealing with new characters and subplots that have already started but also you haven't really been introduced to them, it's very poorly managed, I think.
Yeah, because like what happens is you're sitting there confused for 2 episodes, and then it's finally revealed what's happening or who this person is or what their motives are. But you're like, I would have liked to have known 2 episodes prior, at least an inkling of what it was, so I wasn't sitting there confused for 2 episodes trying to piece it. I mean, there were so many times I was like rewinding stuff to just see like, did I miss something?
Yeah.
Let me hear this dialogue again. You know, it just, man, it just, it really does come unraveled that second half. And
there is, and again, I think it's a balance of like the first half of the show is one solid thorough plot line, and it really like you get a little mix up with some things like when Dice is introduced and Elena, and they introduce new characters and they throw hurdles in front of the characters, but it's really like there's one goal and there's one plot going on.
Yeah.
And then in the second half of the show they throw you up into the space station, so not only are you trying to acclimate to understanding what Second Earth is actually like, they've also added like 5 plots all at the same time, none of which are really thought out, and it just becomes a mess.
Which, speaking of messes, so the animation, I want to talk a little bit about that for just a second. Is man, oh man, like, whew, there are so many times where, again, this is another thing. It just doesn't seem like the care was given to it, where proportions are weird. I mean, man, you look at a scene where they're from a distance. I remember there was one where they're driving in the truck and it's just these little squiggle lines that just represent eyes. And it looks just like the most basic. Even like shots from just like mid distance are so poorly animated, and it's just really
definitely
bad.
Watching it felt like a show that faced budgetary problems, because like the animation is, for its time, I think quite good at times. Like
it's inconsistent though. That's the issue.
Well, that's what I mean. Like there are times where they had to clearly cut corners. At least that's what it seems like. Where it's like, oh, we can be cheap on this scene because we need to make sure that other scene looks really good. And
yeah, because like I mean, and then when you have a show where it is like they try to do these sexual things, so you see someone trying to touch someone or like they're kissing, and it's just like endless amounts of awkward looking kissing, and you're just like, this is just weird.
It's full open mouth, just
just like
face
but it's,
sucking.
Yeah, it's like, and then they're walking, running, and then I just want to. This is the one thing. Here's one thing I noticed even too. Did you see how like on the computer screens? Even the computer screens looked like someone just kind of like took a pencil and scratched down. They didn't even make an attempt to make it look like a consistent font or typeface or whatever.
Yeah, I did notice.
And I'm just like, come on, man! Like, could you at least attempt to make this look like a computer? Just like, and then the other thing you got to point out about this show is the blue. Their mouths look like vaginas and buttholes. And I just want, I mean, like,
it is.
Yeah,
and that very well could have been intentional because of the sexual theming throughout the entire show.
Yeah, but like, I mean, but it was one of those things where, again, it's like, you're going to make a show and you want to have these monsters and have them kind of have these, similarities to human anatomy, fine. But it just feels like there's no context or reason or it's like first time it opens its mouth, if you're an adult person, I think, who's ever lived in the world, essentially, I mean, unless you've been living in isolation forever, you're going to look at it and go, yeah, that's what that looks like. And I couldn't avoid it. And you can't escape it. And it's literally like the target area is like a butthole. Like that's what kills the blue. It's like and
it's a core. Okay. They call it that, but no, I know what you mean. Yeah. And
it's
I guess
so
speaking of things that are probably because of poor budget or just no care for attention to detail, anytime anyone fired a gun, it was the same 2-second sound clip on loop, regardless of what kind of gun it was, and it made no attempt to match a muzzle flash. It was just the same, like,
and nobody could aim because every time they'd be shooting at something, and it'd be the little bursts of light all over the monster. So it just was look like they were just hitting just shooting, spraying bullets everywhere, and then there would be that one bullet that hits the core.
But
And
even then, all those bursts of lights, they don't line up with the sound
they
of
they
at all
don't
of
match
the
up at all
firing,
with
and
the sound.
it's
Yeah, and so
terrible.
you'd watch it and you're just like, oh my god,
They
what is
couldn't
this,
even
Speed Racer? Like, come on.
I was like, you couldn't even overlay that video because they or sound clip onto itself and just at least make it sound like 8 guns are firing instead of just one, because it was.
Yeah.
I swear to God, it was the same 2-second sound clip on loop for.
Oh,
This is
it
the
had
gun.
to have been.
This is the gun noise. Let's just put
Yeah.
this in. Like,
And it'd be a scene of them just like shooting at the blue with all the little light things flashing, and then it'd be like a close up of the one bullet when it hits the little part, and then and that's it. And it was just that rinse repeat, and it was just like, okay, no man, that was, oh god, there's just so much about this. And then again, just, we go back to like the nudity in it. I mean, there's a part where Alicia, who's a high schooler, there's just like a naked locker room scene where her and Marlene are talking, and again, I'm like, or shower scene thing, and I'm just like, again, I just, there's no context for anything, and that's my issue. Like, I don't have a problem if you're gonna do, I mean, it's, again, questionable why you're having a 15-year-old naked in it, but
I think the point of that is it's a future where that stuff is not even in people's minds. Is kind
and
of
also,
what they're trying
I
to
get
display
that.
with that sexuality is not a shameful thing, nor is it an emotional thing. It's just a thing people are.
That's true. I actually didn't really look at it like that.
I think there is actually kind of a purpose to all the like the sexual scenes, the nudity, things like that.
But it just,
they
again,
really are trying to ingrain it in your brain. Like, people of Second Earth don't have feelings. They don't feel shame. Yeah. They don't feel love. They are, especially the military people we are exposed to, because we're really not exposed to the general population of Second Earth. It's just the military members.
But again,
but that's all been trained out of them. They don't care. That's not the things. The prudency you feel in your head doesn't matter to them. It doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, yeah, Catholic guilt aside.
No, but I think I'm not even saying that's good or it was effective, but I do think that's very clearly what they were going for with all of that.
No, when you say that, it does give me a little more of a different perspective on it, and I can see it. But, and it goes back to just my point of, like, it just doesn't read. You know, like I said, I think if you're going to do an example, I think for me, like, Devilman Crybaby is a good example of how to effectively do that. And I feel like this is not. I feel like it just does not. Again, it goes back to like we talked about the plot. There's no setup. There's no real context. There's no, I don't need someone to just give me exposition at the beginning of like, we on Second Earth don't care about these things or whatever. But it just felt like a little something might have helped me out. Where again, you're just, the scenes are so abrupt in their cuts from location to what's happening that. You're just dropped into these scenes. I mean, I think that one's like the start of an episode, and you're just like, oh, okay, like we're here, and this is what we're doing. So the animation, it's not good, even in my opinion, even by like 90s anime standards. I mean,
I would agree.
Early 2000s.
It has moments where you can see what it could have been, but for the most part, it's very inconsistent, and a lot of it does not look good.
Yeah. Anything? Yeah. So I think, is there anything else that is absolutely like?
I don't think there's anything else pressing.
Want to just dump on this some more?
Well, you did. You mentioned that you thought the ending was very underwhelming. So I guess we could talk about that for a little bit if you want.
Oh yeah, it kind of. I mean, it's so underwhelming that I only watched it 3 days ago and I can barely remember it. It's just because, I mean, they do the song, it's cool, and then you see sort of a montage of events happening, and I'm all for those kinds of things. I like those kinds of endings where it's just the music playing over and it's silent, and you see, like, Miyagi's like, whoa, what are all you guys doing here? And they all turn their guns and they just blow them apart, and it's pretty graphic, actually. But, it just kind of like it goes out with a whimper, in my opinion. It just kind of peters out, and you're like, okay, Marlene and Yuji are happy, and they're like, we're going to figure it out, and the end.
Okay, so you were like very specifically the last 5 minutes. I figured you meant from like, because the main plots you've been introduced to are basically wrapped up with 3 episodes left to go. Like the whole Tony thing and all the High Council being overthrown and Like
Oh, yeah,
basically
that is a
everyone
weird
being happy, and then there's 3 more episodes that like
of them going back to Earth doing
yeah,
the thing, which again was
where
back to another thing where I'm like,
yeah.
why are they doing this? I thought we all established that Earth is not the place to be. Yeah, I mean,
Well, that
you're
was the whole
right.
point of the last 3 episodes. So the episode
Right.
24, the third to last, is the whole decision that Second Earth is just going to exist as Second Earth, and Yuji realizing like I'm a sleeper, I don't have a place here. I have to go back to Earth.
Yeah.
And then episode 25 is they go back to Earth. They introduce you to a bunch of new characters, and then, or well, not really.
God.
They introduce you to one named character and a bunch
was
of
it
other
Rick?
people. No, Rick is the
No, Rick's the other guy,
one.
that's
this
right.
one was maybe Dan.
Bob?
I don't know.
Can we talk about the naming of these people too? You'll get like Yuji, Marley, but then you get like Sue,
Yeah.
Bob, Tony, Joey. Like it's just like it just seemed like they took the most like random American sounding names and were like and just slapped them on a character.
But yeah, they bring you back to Earth, and it's like
think I wrote down
here's
this
some
guy's name. I'll
here's
find
some
it.
new characters, and we kill them 10 minutes later just to remind you one more time that like the blue kill people because you haven't
everyone
learned
dies.
it
Don't
yet.
get too comfortable.
Yeah. And then that's immediately followed up by everything just being okay, presumably through Yuji directly talking to the Earth. Is kind of
Yeah.
what I gathered from that scene.
It's something. It's a weird, like, he travels through time and space, speaks to the Earth, sees the past, the present, the future, and it's just like, okay.
Yeah, and he sees. I think what I took from it, I would just be curious what your interpretation, because the thing I took from it the most is when they were going through his vision scenes, like the future ones, or maybe they're supposed to be the present ones, show, excuse me, in the cities, there's like vines and sprouts growing up from the blue and from the human eggshell things, the green blobs. There's like vines growing up through them, and so I think like the point was supposed to be like the blue were a immune system of Earth effectively, and they've served
that
their
is
purpose.
One of the things they talk about.
So
like
nature will reclaim all these cities, and as long as you don't build big cities again, humans can live here and it'll be fine.
Yeah,
but just don't build cities anymore.
It does have a very eco like message of, hey, we're destroying the Earth, and so the blue were something that the Earth kind of developed this genetic mutation in order to kill off the dominant species. So now there's a new one, and
you have to approach
at the end it's like we don't need it anymore, so all the blue were going back, except for there's the big monster one at the end.
Yeah, and in this, like, the Earth, you have to look at it as a sentient being. Like the Earth, the Earth itself is an alive being,
like a mother.
Yeah. Yeah, Mother Earth.
But, yeah, you get it. But yeah, it is a weird way to end the show though, because there's this, you think you're at the end, and then here's like 3 more episodes tacked on of some brand new plot point, and you're like, all right, I guess I made it this far. So
which is probably why they ditched a lot of that when they made the movie, which I still haven't seen.
Yeah,
but that was my understanding. The last like third of the show is not included in the movie at all. So.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to go back and watch it someday. But yeah, I just overall, I'm conflicted by this show in a lot of ways, because I oddly enjoyed it, but man, was it not good. I guess I think we've kind of probably run it into the ground about this show of what it is and what it isn't. I think, inconsistent is the word that I think describes this show best. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that is very fair.
Yeah, where you got these moments of good animation, good voice acting, interesting plot, good action, and then within the next breath, you hear some horrible side character who looks like his face is made of putty and, is getting ripped apart by a blue.
And if you're lucky, he'll have a real stereotypical accent from some region of the country.
Oh man, one of my favorite things in anime is the random southern accent.
Yeah.
Oh, and by one of my favorite, I hate it so much when it happens. It's like, hey man, this guy's got to sound like he's from the country, or he's a little dumb. Like, what are we gonna do? And it's like, give him a southern accent, and it just like takes me out every time. There's a moment in Perfect Blue like that, which is an amazing movie, and there's just one moment where a character pops in, she's like, hey y'all, like what you, and I'm like, oh god, okay, like why did you, they're in the middle of Japan, I get it, like we were trying to do a dialect, but whatever, that's a whole nother discussion. But yeah. So Brandon, I guess we can wrap this up. We're approaching an hour on this, so I told you I had a lot to talk about.
Probably about time.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just so many things that I wanted to say, but I was excited to talk about it and actually finally fully watch it. I will say that. I was excited to fully watch this show so I could have a fully formed opinion on it for what it's worth.
All right, so what would you say your final opinion is then?
I feel like I always go first. Why don't you go first?
All right.
I could be wrong, but you go first.
So I could never in good conscience recommend this show to anyone I know that watches anime. I don't think I would ever say you should watch this because I think you'll like it. It's a weird mix, like I said, if it's a romance story that gets muddled in its B plot lines, set in this weird post-apocalyptic world that has giant robots that aren't anything fun like normal giant robot anime is, and just everything about it doesn't work. So if I were to say, does it hold up, I would say no. But also, I like the show. I don't know why. I like it. I would watch it again myself sometime, but I would never tell someone else to. So
it's so funny. I just wanted to look it up to make sure. They're called shrikes in this. So if you're looking for your giant robot, what's it called? It's called a shrike.
It's a shrike. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say a scythe for a second. I'm like no. Death Scythe from Gundam Wing, and I knew that wasn't it. All right. It's fun. It's fun to get to hear your thought on it. So yeah. I mean, in short, I agree, but I'll give a little bit more. I again would never, if someone's like, "Hey man, I want to get into anime and what should I watch?" I would never ever recommend this show. If someone was like, "Hey, I've watched a ton of anime and I'm just trying to find something else, what should I watch?" I would never recommend this show. If someone's like, "Hey, I'm really looking for some like older anime," not going to recommend the show. I would not recommend this to pretty much anyone except the most curious person who has literally run out of everything to watch. That being said, I enjoyed it. Yeah. There was a day where I watched, I powered through in a couple days the last pretty much half of the show in a couple days. And, I would look at it and I'd laugh and I'd out loud would just say stuff like, "Oh my Jesus Christ, like what is happening?" And I'd just be, yelling at the TV or something. But I enjoyed doing that, and it is not a good show, and I don't think it holds up. And that being said, I still liked it.
Yeah, I can't explain it. I can't, for the life of me, explain why I did enjoy watching this from basically start to finish. It lost me in the Yuji is now the crazy person episodes. That didn't do it for me at all. But I don't know. I enjoyed it, and I don't know if it's because of just Yuji and Marlene are written just right that it works. I don't know.
Do you think it too is one of those things where it rides that line that certain media does where it's so bad it's kind of good, like where it is not bad to the point where it's you just can't watch it, it's awful, and it's not, but it's just like it's so bad it's kind of good, it's entertaining, you know what I mean?
I don't think so, because I never found myself laughing at the show because it was so
That's
bad,
true,
which is usually what that is to me. So
right. So there you go. I mean, that's our answer. Don't watch it, but
don't watch it, but we like it.
We like it because I guess we're like gluttons for punishment and we hate ourselves. I don't know. I don't know what the reason is. Maybe one day when we discover, we'll do a lot of soul searching and look within ourselves to find out why we or a couple of therapy sessions and find out why we liked Blue Gender and what it says about us. But yeah, I think that's it. I mean, yeah, I say so. Our conclusive answer is it does not hold up. But if you are a glutton for punishment or just curious, know that there are two people out there who's liked it anyway.
And I'm sure there's two more, but that might be it.
That could be everyone. There's probably a good 4 to 5 people who like this show. Hey man, it's got the Anime Classics label on it, which I mean obviously means nothing because if you see what is listed on that at retail, obviously they're just trying to sell some DVDs and Blu-rays. But on that note, thank you so much for listening. It's been a fun episode talking about this. I'm glad we got to.
Yeah, this was way more enjoyable than I expected.
Yeah. So thank you again. We'll be doing more episodes and trying some other stuff coming up, hopefully. So thank you, and we'll see you the next time.
Yep, we'll talk to you.